Coming up on the Texas is about to make it illegal for big social media companies to ban users from using those platforms based on their political viewpoints. Chuck DeVore is the VP of National Initiatives for Texas Public Policy Foundation, and he joins us now to discuss. Chuck, welcome. Good to see you.
Hey, great to be with you.
This is I think the first, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of another state that is actually has advanced this measure or this approach as far as Texas has at this point. How do you think that how will this fare in the Republic of Texas?
Well, I think it's got a decent chance because it doesn't quite go as far as banning. I think that might begin to run afoul of federal law, First Amendment, section, 230. What it does do is it says that if the social media companies remove content, they've got to keep a list of what they're removing, why they're removing it, and they also have to make very clear their terms as to what would get you removed. And so I think that this begins the process of really exposing the huge bias that I think many of us believe that these social media companies, most of which are based in the very, very left-wing Bay Area of California, the bias that they often brush off, well, that's just the algorithms or, human error.
No, I think that's a great point. And because I've been one of those people who's, as I think we know a lot of people. I mean, I think everybody that we know almost had been suspended temporarily at one point or another over that New York Post story. That's like the common ground for everybody. So many people were suspended for sharing that story. That's why I always use it as an example, because to me, that was weird that anybody tried to blame that on an algorithm. You mentioned Section 230 also. Could this serve, do you think, if this actually is adopted as law by the state of Texas, could this serve maybe perhaps as a jumping off point to challenge the definition of terms in Section 230 and not get rid of 230, but maybe modify it to where algorithms are also considered editorializing, and that removes from these platforms that defense so they can't dodge and say that they're not editorialists?
I think the most important thing is the beginning of the process of collecting this information and increasing transparency. And from that, we can improve our decision-making process when it comes to public policy, whether at the federal level, the regulatory level, at the federal level, or at the state level. And so the first step is knowledge. And I think that's what this gives us. And that's why I think the law will probably survive on First Amendment grounds or any other federal challenges. We'll see, of course. It's really not too different than what you've seen passed, by the way, in other Western European countries, although certainly those are a bit more draconian, the right to be forgotten and left alone and all this stuff. We don't see that yet in the Texas legislation. But merely, let's gather information about posts and information that you've taken down. Now, by the way, it does not include and will not prevent the social media companies from, for example, removing harmful content, child pornography, and anything that's obviously criminal activity.
Yeah, this is limited to actual protected speech, not, I disagree with that opinion, so I want to try to fight to make that considered unprotected speech. Chuck, what do you say to those? Because there's some of our conservative brethren, for a lack of a better way to put it, and I totally understand those arguments, because for a while I was kind of in between both of these places. But I think the public square and the idea that only government can exercise in a way that is tyrannical, I think is maybe perhaps an idea that is maybe a little anachronistic considering the time that we're in and the relationship that these corporations have with different administrations, with different politicians and federal government, so they can kind of act as their agents. What do you say to those who are like us and they're like-minded, but they're worried about the precedent that this might establish for going after private businesses? Because this is always the contention that comes up.
Yeah, I think that we have to look at this using, through the lens of like the common carrier argument. At what point do some of these large corporations become essentially like common carriers? In other words, they're so big and ubiquitous in serving everybody that they really need to serve everybody without any discrimination. And you talk about the town square, the public square. We've gotten to the point now where, you could go downtown and, assuming there's anyone downtown because of COVID, You can shout and say all you want down on the public square, and that's what people, of course, have done for hundreds of years. But what happens if you're like Parler and you're using the pipes of Amazon Web Services to get your information out, and then all of a sudden they decide without evidence that you were somehow responsible for the events of January 6th, and they give you the death penalty and they kill your business? What other alternative do you have, right? I mean, some of our colleagues would say, well, go build another internet. Okay, that in
They did try
hundreds
something
of
like
billions
that
of
with
dollars
Parler.
later. Right, exactly.